The South China Sea, as I say, it's about the size of the Gulf of Mexico, and it links the Indian and the Pacific Ocean. But about half the merchant ships in the world pass through the South China Sea. So keeping it open for commercial navigation is a top priority for China and for all the countries of the region who are very dependent on this trade. 80% of China's oil passes through the narrow Malacca Straits and then into the coastal and river cities of China. The ship traffic in this area is 3 times greater than what passes through the Suez Canal and 5 times more than what passes through the Panama Canal. So it's a very strategic and concentrated area. And a blockade by the U.S. Navy with their aircraft carriers could strangle China's economy and also devastate all the countries of the region. And we know this. U.S. war in Syria is devastating for every country in the Middle East. That wars radiate out and create real horror for all the people of the region. Now, China has claimed the majority of the South China Sea for centuries. I mean, this isn't a new question, a new issue. And they're determined, this is a country of 1.3 billion people, not to relinquish their sovereign rights to protect and defend this piece of Chinese territory. They base their claim even on what's called the 9-dash line, which was put forth by the Kuomintang government at a time when it was recognized by the U.S. There are parts of the South China Sea that are also claimed by Malaysia, the Philippines, Taiwan, Vietnam. And really what the U.S. has done is attempted to strike deals and exert enormous pressure on these countries to force alliances against China by claiming to be a protector of small nations and their rights. And very much there is an effort, and we hope and expect it will continue, for People's China to reach equitable agreements with all the countries of the surrounding area, but knowing that everyone's rights and future are at stake with what happens with the U.S. military. This is what has really set back U.S. plans. The decision by President Duterte in the Philippines to open relations with China, and this was announced in a state visit in late October, and step back from being a U.S. pawn. Now this sent shockwaves because the U.S. was planning a whole series of bases on islands that are really also kind of rocky outcroppings, very close to what China was building. And they wanted a big expansion on these bases. They also used the Philippines to take China to what they said was an international court. They said this was a UN court. It had ruled against China on this. I actually looked it up. I found out it had no connection to the UN, and it wasn't even a court. It was like an arbitration company that rented some space in the building where the World Court is housed, but they didn't even arbitrate. They just went there with some papers that the Philippine government had signed off on and came back with a ruling supposedly against China. China said, well, this firm was set up in 1899 to protect, imperialist interests and didn't hold any power over us. But it was interesting because in all the news coverage here, they said international UN court had found against China in the South China Sea. Right? Complete fraud. It's more fake news, like we get every day on every country and every struggle. Now, this area holds also the richest fisheries in the world and possible rich deposits of oil and natural gas. And it was also the center of the effort of what was called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Now, this was an effort by U.S. capitalism to form a trade alliance of 11 what are called Pacific Rim countries, and that extends from Chile, right over to East Asia. All the key countries excluding China. And it was meant to be leverage on China. Now, it had so many onerous clauses in it as to what it would do for working people in the U.S. and Canada and every other country, and doing away with any environmental controls, and be impossible to sue any company if you could hurt their profits. I mean, there are all kinds of clauses in this. It became an international campaign to stop the TPP. And even in the election campaign, you had both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump talking against the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and it finally went down in defeat. Now that's a big setback for U.S. plans. So, and their plan against China to try to exert enormous economic leverage. So they've had two setbacks in the past couple of months in their plans to, both militarily and using other countries and using a trade alliance to push China back. Now, that doesn't mean imperialism accepts defeat. That may bring more reckless threats, and that is what sailing aircraft carriers into the region means. But I think we should be really prepared for crisis, quick news ahead, never believe any stories, and we should never forget the Gulf of Tonkin when the U.S. was opening a war on Vietnam, where they claimed some U.S. destroyers were hit by Vietnamese PT boats, and they went to Congress that very afternoon and got a resolution of war. It happened so fast, and it was a complete fraud. It was a complete fraud. So, and we could go all the way back to Remember the Maine. So I'm going to wind up on that. We should never believe any of the news coming out. This is the way U.S. imperialism operates around the world and right here at home. And it's meant to set people against each other. It's meant to impose through military domination and fear. And we actually applaud the resistance of the people of China, whether it's in building a slingshot or it's in holding on to their own economy.